The reason I'm doing this is because during a Kundalini meditation, I had a vision that ultimately gave me the instructions to create what I produce now. I got to the violet, and then I had this experience like Jodie Foster in Contact of going through some sort of a wormhole and coming out in what experientially was another type of dimension. The take-home message was, if you can learn the types of frequency patterns that DNA makes in health and disease, you then know how to instruct a sick cell to become healthy or an old cell to become young.
Hey, Guy here. Today, I welcome back to the podcast Dr. Todd Ovokaitys. I hope I pronounced your surname correctly, Todd. And wow, my mind is blown. This conversation is incredible. It's probably something you're going to want to listen to for a couple of times and hang in there as he builds the foundations of the direction of the podcast. As we lean in more and more, it becomes more and more apparent where the conversation's going. But we talk about stem cell therapy, which is what he specializes in. But not only that, how he used light and sound to essentially guide where the stem cells go within the body. It's mind-blowing stuff. I'm not doing it justice. But of course, I wanted to speak to him about Kundalini as well after my Kundalini experience, and wanted to speak to him about his thoughts that because he just looks at everything within the body, and he blew my mind of what he shared around that too. And not only that, his own personal Kundalini experience and how it had direct impact in the very work that he does today. Amazing stuff. If you enjoy this episode, please let me know in the comments below. Please share it with a loved one or friend. This information, I feel, needs to get out there more and more and more. And without you guys, it can't. So I appreciate your support. I hope you're enjoying the podcast that I'm delivering. And of course, if you want to know anything about what we're up to, our workshops with Live in Flow, from our one-day retreats to our 3 to 5 night deeper retreats or meditations or anything, links are below wherever you're listening to this. Much love from me. Let's go over to Todd. This is awesome. Dr. Todd, thank you so much for coming back on the podcast.
Always a pleasure. Thank you. We tend to get into some of the deeper realms of theory and philosophy. So see where it goes today.
Absolutely. And just to lay a platform, I know you came on the podcast, I think it was about 3 years ago, maybe even longer. It shows how quickly time is going. But just for listeners, as a brief overview, I'll have to ask you the question. If you were on an aeroplane and a stranger sat next to you and asked you what you did for a living, how would you answer that?
How would I answer that? Good question. It depends on who it is. I might just say I'm a doctor. If I'm being more complete, I'd say I started out as an internist in pulmonary and critical care, but now I'm basically a stem cell biophysicist.
Wow.
Yeah.
And what if you could distill what a stem cell biophysicist is in 30 seconds, which probably is impossible for us layman people, what would that mean?
I'll use a metaphor. And we think of music as literally making the various instruments of the human voice sing. And that's in a certain frequency range. And molecules sing, and since cells are a collection of molecules and they're doing active dynamic things, cells sing as well. So we've invented a new type of laser technology that creates a new type of waveform that allows a signal to go deeply through tissue. And we can also tune it, as it were, to sing the song of the cells. With our main work now, we're singing the song of the stem cells, so we can awaken a particular type of stem cell from its lifelong hibernation and then direct it where we would most like it to go for that particular person, which is more of a quantum sense, increasing the probability that a stem cell goes where a person would most like to have it. And by metaphor, even though we start with lasers, we adjust the waveform so we turn the light wave into more of a sound wave. And that's a little bit technical. If you want, I could describe how that happens. So fundamentally, when we convert a light wave into an acoustic like wave, we can literally play tunes of frequencies that are in resonance with the way the molecules are naturally vibrating and rotating. And as you know, anytime you provide a resonating signal, and resonance simply means matching the natural way the thing vibrates, you can put in little amounts of energy, but if you put in the right frequency, you'll build much more energy in the system.
Wow. So I got to ask you the question then, or just to help break this down, what you just said, so I
Sure.
understand. So would it be fair to say then a stem cell comes on, like, produces every second? They knew, but they haven't had instructions of what to do yet. Would that be a fair layman's explanation?
I probably need to go back a step and
Okay,
even define what a stem cell is.
please.
A stem cell is a cell in the body that is capable of replicating and then doing one of two things. It either stays in its happy reserve pool as a type of cell that can come in and replace things that are injured or damaged or worn out, or it goes out of reserve and helps to replace a cell that's injured, damaged, or worn out. So it's basically like a s- pool of reserve materials to rebuild stuff. It's like you got a woodshed and you got some wood, and if you need to build something, you take the wood out. The difference here is that the wood can reproduce itself and keep the wood pile high.
Got it. Perfect. Perfect. And then, because we hear stem cell therapy all the time, and I've heard people flying to Panama or whatever it is and having stem cell injections. I know they're doing it in Australia now. But am I guessing right then the challenge with that is that you're hoping it's going to go to the areas of where it the repair is needed the most, and by using light or sound and frequency, we're actually able to spot target the areas you want the stem cells to go?
Yes, that's vitally important. If the cell doesn't get there, it is not able to really repair or regenerate there. So that's one
Got it.
factor. And even more, I just gave a basic definition of what a stem cell is. The biggest confusion in this whole arena is that when you say the term stem cell, it sounds like one thing. Like you've got your normal cells and you got your reserve cells called stem cells. And if there was just one type of stem cell, then it would be clear. And if I can take a few minutes, I can briefly give an overview of the hierarchy of stem cells.
Please.
So, for the person who is asking the question whether they should say yes to stem cells, it's really important to know a few fundamental things, which is what is the type of stem cell, what is the source of the stem cell, and then what is the delivery method of the stem cell. So, types of stem cells. We all begin in the magic moment of conception. And somehow we start with one cell that got half its genetic information from mom and half of it from dad. And it undergoes this extraordinary process where it begins to divide. And once it gets to about the 30 cell stage, all those cells would be considered embryonic stem cells. And that is the most powerful type of stem cell in the hierarchy. True embryonic stem cells can probably regenerate anything, yet they have a challenge. A true embryonic stem cell has the name totipotent. which means totally potent, which means that a single embryonic stem cell can become a whole new person. And
Oh,
because they're so powerful, they are at risk for producing benign tumors called teratomas. And they're not as dangerous because they're benign. And that said, they can grow big enough that they may compress things or cause challenges that require their removal. What's weird about a teratoma is that it's a collection in kind of a random organization of all the tissues of the body. So it can be little like a ping pong ball, or bigger like a tennis ball, or as big as an orange, as big as a grapefruit, or as big as a cantaloupe. And what's weird is that it can have hair and skin and teeth and nails and muscle and bone and cartilage and blood vessels and every other type of tissue. So basically, it can be a giant hairball with lots of weird stuff in it. So don't want one of those. There are ethical issues about embryonic stem cells because they're usually derived from in vitro fertilization, where a couple in their aim of fertility may have multiple embryos made, because sometimes several are needed to have an effective conception. And when a couple is used all that they're going to use, there's some left over. And then the question is, well, do we use these for a potential treatment, or do we just burn them in the incinerator? And fundamentally, right now, they just burn them in the incinerator. And that gets around, in a weird way, the question about this could have become a person, and that makes it ethically challenging to use it for medical treatment. So the solution is, well, just discard it, basically. That said, even beyond the ethical questions, and this is not the venue for that kind of debate,
mm,
there is a true medical risk, which is the formation of these benign tumors. And for that reason, I think it's actually been wise to put a hold on it until the risk of that complication can be understood or mitigated. So that's embryonic. Just past embryonic, the next step along the way is called pluripotent. So pluri means many, and potent, of course, means powerful. A pluripotent stem cell has the ability to make all three germ layers. And just as review, early in this development process, this collection of cells splits into three layers, which you probably recall from your biology courses: the endoderm, mesoderm, and ectoderm. And then each of those germ layers produce the types of organs and tissues associated with that germ layer. A pluripotent stem cell can make all the different germ layers, and thence literally has a capability of making any type of cell in the body. Next down the chain, we have germ layer derived stem cells. And these would be called multipotent. They can make many things, but not everything. The most commonly used type of germ cell line stem cell is the type of stem cell that's derived from bone marrow or from fat, called the mesenchymal stem cell. It's a long word and a little bit complex. Fundamentally, these are cells that will produce these so-called mesodermal elements. So a mesenchymal stem cell, abbreviated MSC, typically derived from fat before it was more derived from bone marrow, that these MSCs are designed to become mesodermal structures. So they're already inclined to become muscle, bone, cartilage, ligaments, tendons, and even fat itself. So if these cells are being used for various purposes that would be musculoskeletal, for assisting joints to regenerate, supporting the strength of tendons and ligaments, uh, even helping to support muscle that needs to be strengthened. They're really designed for that purpose. And then at the final tip of the chain, you have single tissue committed stem cells. So a stem cell that's just going to become a liver cell or a pancreatic cell or a heart muscle cell, for example. Thus, you have this big hierarchy of different types of stem cells. And I think if we're really being sophisticated, would literally have a menu of all the different types of stem cells and what they're particularly good for in what circumstances. So someone saying they had stem cell therapy, I'd say, oh, okay. Well, what kind of stem cells did you get? Were they your cells or from another person? And then how were they delivered? In terms of delivery, the mesenchymal stem cells are particularly used for joint, ligament, tendon, and cartilage related issues. And they're pretty widely used for that. And to get a benefit, essentially the best result is giving them by local injection, injecting them exactly where they're needed. The challenge with MSCs, if you're trying to get them somewhere, is that they're big. And whenever you inject something intravenously, the first place that it goes is to the right side of the heart, and then it goes through the lungs, and then finally to the left side of the heart, where it can go to the rest of the body. And here we have a mechanical issue because the average range, a typical range of an MSC diameter is 12 to 30 microns. That's really small, but a pulmonary capillary is even smaller at about 6 microns. So the MSCs may be useful to give them intravenously where they will lodge in the lung. Only a very small percentage is small enough to somehow squeak their way through. And in the lungs, they still make cytokines and growth factors, chemistry that stimulates the body to regenerate. And there is a value, literally kind of like an internal pharmacy. However, very few of those cells actually get through to become replacement cells. The other issue is whether it comes from another person. If the cells are your cells from your body with your genotype, when you give them back, you don't expect any immunologic reaction. They're your cells, the immune system recognizes them. However, there is the use of so-called allogeneic, which means for another person, and then another set of factors come in. And
Wow.
probably the most common allogeneic use would be umbilical cord blood, which those cells are really young, which makes them potent and powerful and full of juice. However, they may not necessarily incorporate as that person's own cells. And they're also big. So unless you inject them locally, there'll be a tendency for them just to stick in the lung and give this really nice growth factor treatment for a while. There could be potential challenges of there being a tissue mismatch. They tend to be pretty robust with respect to that because they're not expressing the tissue antigens that the body recognizes unless they differentiate, and then potentially there are issues. So there's a lot of use of cord blood. It's often been beneficial. They're like the mesenchymal stem cells from fat. A cord blood is typically just mesenchymal stem cells that have often been multiplied to give them more numbers. And particularly for local injected uses, they can be quite good. The other factor with mesenchymal stem cells is that they age. So if someone is getting MSCs harvested from their fat, and the goal is to support a joint recovering faster, the MSCs work really great if someone's 20 years old, and they may work very little if they're 80 years old. So
Right.
stem cells in the body age just like the rest of the body, with a particular exception. And that's our area of work. So the platform that we've had the privilege of participating in is the discovery process of this amazing gift, I would call it, the gift from source, of a type of stem cell that is just past embryonic, that forms early in gestation from a region called the primordial germ ridge, and they're pluripotent. So they're not embryonic with the risk of forming weird tumors. The name of these cells is very small embryonic-like stem cells. They're embryonic-like because they still have early stage antigens, but they've developed to the point that studies have shown they don't have a risk of forming the benign tumors called teratomas. So they're pluripotent, which means they can form any type of tissue in the body, depending upon the environment that you put them in. And they're also very small, which is useful. And by very small, it's really small. A nucleus is about 1 micron in diameter. And these cells, in their usual dormant state, are 1 to 2 microns in diameter. So a 1 to 2 micron V cell has little trouble getting through a 6 micron pulmonary capillary, but a 12 to 30 micron MSC is just going to have a mechanical problem of fitting a big ball through a small tube. The other thing that is insane, well, not insane, like someone created it this way, but it's extraordinary that for unknown reasons, these cells that are called VSELs, as I said, for very small embryonic-like stem cell, and for short, I just call them VSELs. So when I say VSEL, it'll be representing the VSELs. The most amazing thing about the VSELs is that for unknown reasons, they go into hibernation around the time that we're born. And they literally shift into a metabolically dormant state. They use very little energy. And because they're not dividing, they're essentially not aging, which means their telomeres aren't shortening. Their epigenetic patterns aren't changing from younger cells to much older cells. While the body is aging the way it usually does, these cells are basically in suspended animation and staying extremely young.
So we have those logs on the wood pile waiting to be accessed. Is that what I'm hearing?
Uh, you have logs on the wood pile that can regenerate themselves so far almost indefinitely that can make any type of structure that you want within the house of the body.
Wow, that is insane.
It is. Yeah. It's useful. It's very useful.
It's very useful. How, so so how I'm just going to ask a basic question. How do we access that?
Mhm. Well, that's work that we've been developing at both the basic science and clinical level. It turns out that to access these cells, we don't have to do anything more invasive than just drawing blood. Uh, Getting the fat-derived MSCs requires a mini liposuction. The bone marrow requires putting a great big fat needle through a bone and pulling out
Wow.
the marrow, where this is basically no more invasive than getting a blood test.
Wow. What is,
And let me explain it a bit further. So
please?
if our if our goal is simply anti-aging and the person is otherwise healthy, then we only need to draw 10 cc tubes of blood, or 60 cc's, which isn't so much. It's about a tenth of a unit if someone was giving blood, or often what people have drawn if they're getting blood tests. So just 60 cc's. And from that, we're able to separate out what we don't need. We don't need the red or white cells. And if they're injected, they're potentially inflammatory. So from that, we derive about 40 cc's. That's this beautiful preparation that has plasma, platelets, platelet-derived growth factors, which are also beneficial, and then these V cells, but they're asleep. So the process we've developed with lasers, which you might have talked somewhat about before, we've invented a new type of laser system that creates a new type of waveform that allows us to send the signal much more deeply through the body. And using this new type of laser that is engineered literally to sing the song of the stem cells in light, we treat
Wow.
that preparation with the laser. And we have done and published a basic science experiment in what we call our Manchester paper, because this work was done in Manchester, England, with one of the persons who developed in vitro fertilization. So he was part of the team with Sir Robert Edwards that won the Nobel Prize for creating in vitro fertilization in 2010. So he's a very good scientist. In his Manchester lab, we did the experiment of counting the cells before the laser and after different durations of using the laser. And we found that the sweet spot was about 3 minutes. 1 minute initiated, 2 minutes was better than 1, 3 minutes was even a bit better than that, 6 minutes was worse, and 9 minutes was like not doing it at all. And for your enlightened audience, you might find it interesting that 3 minutes was the amount of time that I was using, but I got to that number by using applied kinesiology.
Huh.
And then we did the
Huh.
experiment, which confirmed that that was the ideal amount of time. What's particularly interesting is that immediately after using the laser, the cell counts of the V cells more than doubled. And the actual number of cells in the roughly 40 cc's is on the order of 1.5 to 2 million cells per cc, or roughly 60 to 80 million of these very young, potentially newborn caliber stem cells that are pluripotent, small enough to go through the lung and go anywhere in the body. At least from the clinical observations we've seen, it looks like they do go everywhere. And then once these one-day-old pluripotent cells that can regenerate anything are in the circulation, we can also increase the probability that they go where a person most would like them to be from a clinical standpoint.
Wow. So let's say we are focusing on somebody like you mentioned that's healthy and looking at just longevity in
Mhm.
general
Mhm.
because we age. Is that something then would need it to be done on a regular basis to maintain that health, or is it something you do once? Like how? What have what have you found?
That's an excellent question. And that really is the next step of the discussion. Like, you do it just once. If you do it again, when do you do it? For the person who's interested in anti-aging, and I'll make an important point here. A couple of years ago, I was in Boston and attended a lecture of Dr. George Church, the developer of CRISPR. And he made a point, and I agree with it. He said that anti-aging is really boring to him because even if you slow aging, it's still kind of dismal. Instead of like falling down the mountain really fast, it's not quite as fast, but it's just like, diminishing returns. Things just get worse and worse. That's just not really exciting. What excites him and me too is true age reversal. like going back up the mountain, being younger, stronger, smarter, fitter, faster. And what we've shown when we look at biologic age using the most accurate clock that exists, which is the epigenetic DNA methylation aging clock. It's a mouthful. I could explain that if you want the technical details. There are two clocks, telomere length, which people know about much more generally than the other clock. However, the inventor of the most accurate clock says telomere length is only 14% accurate,
Wow.
whereas the epigenetic aging clock is much more accurate. And that's Dr. Stephen Horvath of UCLA. And one of the most famous of these clocks is named after him, the so-called Horvath clock. So a little over 2 years now, we've had the ability to actually look at someone's biological age at the DNA level with the most accurate clock that exists. And at the beginning, we didn't have any pre-treatment data. We just had the data if someone had had one or more treatments. And what we found was really interesting. We found that if someone had had one of these treatments anytime in the past 5 years, that they were generally 3 years younger biologically than their chronological age. People had had no treatments, we found that they were typically the same or even a little older biologically than their chronological age. And that's generally been the case. There are a few exceptions of people that are really doing all the right stuff. Yet, as our yardstick, those cases we did that hadn't had a treatment were generally as old or older biologically than their birth date age. So someone having one treatment, even in the past 5 years, being 3 years younger, that was pretty exciting. What was more exciting is if someone had two treatments, they were 6 years younger. And if they had four treatments, they were 12 years younger.
Wow. How accessible is this technology at the moment, and how accessible do you think it will be in the future for people?
You ask all the right questions.
Thank you.
So we have our home base in sunny San Diego, and that's where we've been developing these methods. And we do more than just the treatments with the VSELs. We stack it with lots of other things. I've coined the phrase the biohack is the stack. And if these are capable of literally turning back the aging clock by 3 years, then why not do other things to make the effects even more potent? So we do that. We have nutraceuticals, peptides, there are various electromagnetic therapies, energy work, psycho-emotional medicine, and that's just a small part of the list of things that we may choose from, working to get ideal results for a given person. So we're really all about best outcomes and what total picture can we put together and how do we apply it to get the best results. So that's our location. And then I have developed a licensing program. This process is patented and the laser is our invention. So these are available only through us. And we make them available to licensees who have done the training in the so-called standard operating procedures for doing the entire process, as well as the logic of how you optimize the laser guidance minutes, the 20 to 30 minutes after we infuse the cells, that we believe that giving them a signal to increase the likelihood that they go where we'd most like them to go is going to be orchestrated. So there is some art and artistry to defining the guidance minutes, and there's a logic that we share that only covers a general situation. There are often circumstances where the practitioner has to use their own art as an artisan to
Right.
define that. The program now has 26 locations, mostly in the US, and we also have artisans in Belgium, Mexico, more recently in Panama, and most recently Singapore and Malaysia.
Okay. Okay. Wow.
No one in
Fascinating.
Australia yet. Yeah,
Yeah.
though there
Not
is
not one in
interest.
Australia yet.
There's interest, and we've had the challenge of all the COVID-related issues of
Mhm.
making it available,
Yeah.
which may
Fair
be
enough.
lightening up. Is that any better over there, or can you, like,
Yes, they finally loosened the grip over here. You can get around now.
well, you can shop more than 5 kilometers from home?
Yes, yes, yes. Yeah.
That's good.
Thankfully, yeah. Fortunately, I live in a small little surf town, so I kind of avoided most of it anyway.
Oh,
But
good.
yeah. So my next question to you is then, and I want to touch on the metaphysical a little bit, but
Mhm.
what is our human potential, do you feel, with this knowledge that you continually gain? And I asked the question because we were speaking off air that I had a movement of energy, a Kundalini awakening in about 8, 9 years ago. And when that was occurring, I felt it was like I felt every single cell in my body come alive. It was a symphony, because when you spoke about the symphony of cells at the beginning, that's what I felt and experienced that, and it really woke me up to think I know nothing. That like I've been almost blind my whole life, and I'm experiencing something more. And it's always led me to ask more questions about, well, what is our potential? Because that energy at the time felt very realigning, healing, and it keeps me curious to think, well, what is the potential of our body, our cells? Where can we go with all this? Because the more I lean in, the more I just keep asking questions. I'm not getting.
Every answer you get leads to 3 more questions, and
Exactly, exactly.
Yep. We did chat a bit before we got online and brought up the issue of Kundalini, and if I had any insights or experience with that. And it's really relevant to this discussion about laser awakened and guided stem cells. Because the reason I'm even doing this is because during a Kundalini meditation, I had a vision that ultimately gave me the instructions to create what I produce now. And
Wow.
it was a setup. It was in a meditation course I was taking. And that particular day, we focused on Kundalini energy. And for those who don't even know what the definition is, uh, Kunda refers to a spot at the base of the spine, and Kundalini is described as the serpent energy that rises up the spine when you've opened up all the channels and goes all the way to the crown, activating the crown chakra by endocrine association, the pineal gland. It creates an advanced and enhanced state of awareness, like supercharging the body and the cells with energy and awareness. And that's where the meditation began. So we started with that. And then we did a process which you might want to do yourself, which is really fascinating, in that you can also intend that Kundalini is in a rainbow spectrum. So once we activated it, we paired up with another person in the class, and each of us was told to literally do the rainbow, starting with the red and going up the spectrum, while the other person took notes and then switched. So I did that process, and I went through the spectrum, first the red, then the orange, then the yellow, then the green, then the blue, and the indigo. And each color has its own flavor, its own set of characteristics, the particular things that would bring balance to the body depending on the circumstance. There's this whole realm of color therapy, which is part of what we have studied because we work with different colors of lasers. So that gives us a starting point for understanding what a particular color of laser light will do as well. And what got interesting was when I got to the violet. And then I had this experience like Jodie Foster in Contact of going through some sort of a wormhole and coming out in what experientially was another type of dimension. And when I got to this vision, this new realm of information, the first thing I saw were the guardians of the gate. And it was like these 2 8-foot tall Alibaba guys with big curved swords. And the message was, you have permission to enter here. However, there's responsibility that goes with it. And they said that others have not used this responsibly and they were destroyed. And they showed some heads flying, literally, to make the
As you
point.
do.
And when I went through the portal, I came to this giant room, and what was the key element of it was that it was filled with DNA. Like you had taken the DNA in a 1 micron nucleus and expanded it many, many, many times so it would fill a whole room. And it had a living awareness and it communicated. And it said that the understanding of science about DNA is correct, but incomplete. DNA is a massive information encyclopedia that describes the recipe of making thousands of proteins in the body that are necessary for life to exist. And it's more than that. DNA is more than just a double helix. So the double helix is iconic. It's probably on thousands of brands and their logos. And yet, DNA is more dynamic than that. In a cell, you don't just have a double helix, you have supercoils. So the double helix wraps around proteins called histones, and so it becomes a supercoil. And then even those can create another level of coil, and I read up to 7 levels of supercoiling. And the information was, you have coils within coils in an electronic movement, the environment where charges are moving. And what is generated is essentially a radio-like phenomenon that over and above the instructions of how to build a protein, DNA is also transmitting and receiving frequency signatures that is integral to its function. And the message was, the take-home message was, if you can learn the types of frequency patterns that DNA makes in health and disease, you then know how to instruct a sick cell to become healthy or an old cell to become young. And that was the information which inspired me to segue from pure conventional medicine to doing biophysics research, understanding frequency medicine, electromedicine, everything that came before, and then finally, ultimately building a technology where the waveform that we create, and I'll give you a little information about it because it's cool. So ordinary laser produces waves in phase, and you add them, you get an amplified wave. What we've done, which allows the types of signatures that we give and the depth of penetration that we get to make it useful, is ordinary laser light in the frequencies we use only goes about 5 millimeters through tissue, and we go up many times further than that, is instead of the waves exactly in phase, we've developed a way to align them exactly out of phase. And when you add them together, they basically cancel each other's vectors. So you get a vector sum zero of the electric fields and a vector sum zero of the magnetic fields. From the observational standpoint, you have two visible ways of light going in, and what comes out is invisible. You can't measure on a power meter because in that wave pair form, there's no net electric or magnetic field, which is what deflects the electrons to be able to measure their presence. Now, what's interesting in this discussion of this DNA vision that gave rise to go on this discovery process is that light also has what's called a polarization state. So a wave of light, looking at it one way, is like a sine wave going through space. But if you look at it coming towards you in its polarization state, it's cycling like a spiral. So what we've created is a spiral counter spiral waveform of light, which is basically the geometric structure of DNA also.
Wow. There's a lot in there. That's, I'm still thinking back to that contact moment you said, because I had one of those myself, and I tapped out the other end, though I didn't stay there. It freaked me out. I was like, oh my God, that's just unbelievable. So the fact that you stayed there and hung out, I'm like, credit to you. That's incredible from that. So if we've got this potential within the, like you say, the DNA, and it's a sender and receiver of frequency,
Mhm.
if and sound, how much can we then use ourselves through intention, through meditation, through visualization, through toning our voice? Because they're all contributors to. Is that in your mind worth an exploration for people to allow our human potential for those cells to, I guess, reorganize themselves to become a healthier cell?
I'll go further than that.
Okay.
I think it's essential to really explore all the avenues of enhancing the human potential. If there's a particular advantage to what we're doing with biologic age reversal, here's how I look at it. We have this incredible gift of whatever you want to call it, God, source, all the other many names of whatever this unifying principle is through the cosmos, this unifying love and unity field principle that we already have in our bodies a type of essentially newborn caliber pluripotent stem cell that can make anything and reverse the age not just of adult cells, we believe even make your other stem cell pools younger. And if we just look at it from the standpoint that we provide this information to the body, and these awakened cells simply provide the information and the timing reset to shift the body to 3 years younger. Someone has gone back up the mountain 3 years and they've got a reset. Now they have 3 years to look at diet, exercise, lifestyle, meditation, yoga, martial arts, and 1,001 different types of manifestation practices throughout all sorts of different traditions, and many inspired teachers and masters and guides for those things that, as they say, when the student is ready, the master will appear. Like there's all the synchronicity that gets involved in when you learn a particular body of knowledge that seems to be right for you to learn. So what I'd say is the real benefit of this age reversal, and the simple math would be if it turns back the clock 3 years, if a person did this every 3 years, they could literally become ageless. If a
Wow.
person does it more frequently than every 3 years, they can actually start turning back the clock. And we have people now that are 12 to 18 years younger biologically than their birthday age doing this process. And if we kept it simple, just say, do one of these every 3 years, turn back the clock 3 years, how much better a version of yourself can you be if you're really working on it for 3 years? And what if you do that again and build and build and build? It offers the time and opportunity to have a young, vital, high functioning, well connected cognitive vehicle for asking the question, how can I up level? Like, how much can I up level in 3 years? And do it again. Well, now I'm at this level. How can I push the envelope and move further? I think it's really offering a platform, a springboard, as it were, to have the time to explore the full range of the human potential, which my simple answer would be essentially limitless.
Yeah.
Well,
And it it's such a great exploration. Like I love it. I love it, you know, and that's why I do this podcast. And I get excited by potential, and my wish is to transfer that enthusiasm into other people, so they kind of light the fire within themselves, you know,
right.
to ask the questions and see what's out there, and really go for it.
Well, if someone looked from the outside at the work that I'm doing, they'd say, well, you're a pioneer in this area of age reversal medicine. And I love it. And it's so satisfying seeing people get better in various ways. There are probably a few things that feel better than that, other than maybe a good meditation or having Kundalini awaken. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it seems like that's the purpose, is to provide this new modality that could be beneficial for health, wellness, and longevity. And to me, it's really about being the bridge. And the passion that drives me the most, and it sounds like even drives you the most, is really exploring the limits of the human potential. And I've had the good fortune of meeting people with various modalities, disciplines, and techniques. It's amazing what you can develop. If you do the discipline, like it doesn't just happen. You got to do the work if you really want to perform better doing these things. And yet it's amazing what we can do if we have a training method that's really good that takes you from one place to another. I'll comment on one in particular because I've done the first 2 or 3 levels of it. It's so cool. It's called Vision, and it's based on an Indonesian martial art called Merpati Putih, which means the white dove. And Vision is the subset. There are 5 different areas, including actual martial arts and combat. There's one area that's about enhancing the physical senses. So Vision is a method of learning how to see the world blindfolded.
Uh,
And it's brilliant. They start very basically and build with a combination of martial arts movements, yoga, meditation, breathwork, and intention. And at the end of a 5-day intensive, pretty much everybody can find things blindfolded much, much better than chance. And they say each level boosts your chi by a factor of 10. And then you use that amplified chi to use it to see the world around you using your pineal gland as a secondary organ of vision. And then level 2 boosts that to yet a higher level of being able to literally use your now enhanced supersensory system. Now you go beyond just moving something that or tuning into and finding something blindfolded, you start discriminating colors blindfolded, and you get better at moving through a forest of poles without hitting them blindfolded. And it's also about tuning in to a higher level of awareness and bringing in a different level of information that's really about what is your journey, what is your path, what is your next best step, and how can you take these steps to explore what you're really here for and what you really have the ultimate potential to be and become. And if you can keep rejuvenating the body, you just have more time to do that. So I think it's part of the equation that really goes hand in hand with exploring this question of what are we really capable of being and becoming.
Incredible. And that sounds incredible. I have heard of them before, Vision, and
Mhm.
I believe it was on. I had a documentary maker on a couple of years ago, Caroline Corey. I'm not sure if you're
Uh-huh.
familiar with her work,
Mhm.
but I think that's where I first heard it. Is that something you're learning like in a class somewhere near you, or are they a global outfit?
Their training
Do you
center
know?
is in Ogden, Utah. Occasionally, they do trainings outside the main center, but not so much.
Okay.
And I actually did my first level in Austin. I think that was the first time they actually did a training offsite. There were about 30 of us. And even the children could find the objects blindfolded, which is pretty cool. Then the second level, I actually did the main training center, which is in Ogden, Utah, and that really took things to another level. It was quite amazing what you're actually able to see and perceive blindfolded if you awaken your supersensory capabilities. And I'm waiting for level 3, which will be in the same training center this July.
Sounds amazing. I look forward to see how you go with that. That's for sure. I just want to, just to wrap up the podcast, I wanted to touch on something before we finish,
Mhm.
and that was your pineal tones.
Sure.
But are you doing that again in next year? Have I?
Yes. Yes.
You
Yeah.
are. Right.
Yeah. Yes. So we've done 11 choirs around the world, and that's got a huge backstory. We could spend another session just talking about that. And to keep it short, each of these has been at a special location of the planet to activate a type of whole energetic planetary system with the goal of helping to clear the planet of its accumulated miseries. And it will be the 12th choir of 12, the final choir in the series called the Aloha Choir, which means hello and goodbye, on the island of Mai, where it said it was last done 26,000 years ago before this modern series. And that will be on 12/12/24. And we expect over 1,000 choristers for that one.
Wow. That sounds incredible. Are that public able to come or is it something, how did, to come and tone along?
Well, this is actually going to be a choir with a performance.
Okay. Oh,
So
it's a performance.
it's a
Yeah.
performance with, uh, well, the room may only hold 700 people. The first choir, we had 500 to 600 people twice. New range will allow
Wow.
700. It's at Ka'anapali, where there's black rock, and at that time of year in December, you can dive underwater and hear a whale song symphony too.
Amazing.
So the prerequisite to sing in the choir is actually learning the tones and tonal patterns, which are we call ancient and future tones that are really about awakening your full potential and having
Yeah.
rejuvenation effects as well. So the basic system is 12 levels of pineal tones, each of which has an intention. That's what we did in the first choir, which was also in Maui on 12/21/12, a date you probably recognize, the end of the Mayan calendar date. And I thought it might end there, but there are now a series of additional levels and patterns. There's now at least 36 different levels, and the newer ones are even more complex and sophisticated, tuned for where we're at, this place, this time, this century. So there's a pretty big body of work. We usually have 2 to 4 conductors, and there's 2 days
Wow.
of rehearsal. There might be 3 for the next one because 'cause it'll be longer. So we gather people from as many as 60 different countries of the world, and then they haven't sung together before, so there's 2 days of rehearsal with the co-conductors, and that prepares it for the actual performance day. So you can imagine a sound bath with hundreds and hundreds of like-minded people singing with clarity of intention.
I it's giving me goosebumps. I'm like, wow, that's incredible.
Right.
Absolutely incredible. I wonder if you ever take the like, how do you fit it all in? That's the other question, but that's probably for another time.
You're not the first to ask that question.
God, amazing. Um, just to wrap up the podcast, I asked this everyone on the show. Um, with everything we've covered today, is there anything you'd like to leave the listeners to ponder on?
I think the core question for everyone should be is, uh, how can I up level? And what's the
Hmm,
next thing that everything is guiding me to go for?
perfect. Brilliant. Where can I send people to if they want to check out more of you, your work? I'll have links in the show notes, but it's always good to say it out loud as well.
Yeah. Probably the easiest while we're developing even more information to share with people is drtado.com. And you can
Perfect.
get a book I've written called Growing Younger,
Which I have. Yes.
which, which goes into the metabolic ways that are really cost effective that can also turn back the clock. And then we have stem cells that can do it. And then there are peptides, and meditation does it too. So all these things work together.
Totally. Well, Todd, thank you so much for coming back on the show today. I know you're a busy man, and I really appreciate your time. I really appreciate our conversations and the wisdom that you share. My mind is always blown. I will re listen to this episode myself to ensure that I get everything that you say. But thank you for doing what you do, and it's greatly appreciated. It's nice to know that there's people like yourself out there doing wonderful things like this. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you for creating a platform for information to be shared. I love these conversations too. It's a great
Thank you.
pleasure.